Brazil, it's just massive, right? Almost like its own continent. And its history, well, it's as deep and tangled as the Amazon rainforest itself. So let's do this. We're going to fly through 5 centuries of history to figure out how this nation was forged in, well, fire, gold, and revolution. Which brings us to the big question, really. How did this place, which was honestly just a side hustle for Portugal at first, turn into the absolute giant of South America? The answer? Well, it starts with a really brutal and undeniable fact. Over 4 million. Just let that sink in for a second. That's the estimated number of enslaved Africans brought to Brazil. That is more than any other nation, any other single place in the Americas. And you have to understand, this isn't just some dark chapter they moved on from. No, it is the bedrock, the very foundation of Brazil's economy, its society, and so much of its culture. Okay, so to really get a handle on Brazil's story, we've got to rewind the clock. Way back, before the year 1500, before a single European ship ever spotted its coastline. Now, it's so important to remember this wasn't some empty land just waiting to be discovered. Not at all. It was a vibrant, complex world. We're talking more than 5 million indigenous people, groups like the Tupi and the Guarani, living in all these diverse and sophisticated societies. They knew this land inside and out, and their world was about to be turned completely upside down. And that brings us to the year 1500. A Portuguese explorer named Pedro Álvares Cabral arrives, and just like that, the colonial clock starts ticking. For the next 300 years, Brazil would be caught in this relentless engine designed for one thing: extraction. You know, for a while, Portugal didn't even seem to care that much about this new land. It really was just a colonial side hustle. The first thing that caught their eye here? A tree. Yep, a tree. The pau-brasil, or Brazilwood. It produced this really valuable red dye, and not only did it give the country its name, but it also kicked off that cycle of exploitation, starting with the forced labor of the indigenous peoples. But the Brazilwood trade? That was nothing compared to what came next. The real economic engine, the thing that truly built colonial Brazil, was sugar. All along the northeastern coast, these massive plantations, they were called engenhos, just exploded. And this sugar machine, it had an insatiable appetite for labor, which is what drove the transatlantic slave trade on an absolutely horrifying scale. It completely and permanently changed the face of Brazil. And after sugar came gold. In the 18th century, there was this massive discovery of gold and diamonds, especially in a region called Minas Gerais. You can just imagine the gold rush that followed. This literally shifted the colony's economic center away from the coast and deep into the interior. And all that wealth, it flowed right back to Europe, funding the Portuguese Empire. So here's the thing you absolutely have to understand. These different cycles, wood, sugar, gold, they weren't just about making money. This whole system, built on extracting resources and enslaving people, it carved these deep, deep patterns of inequality into the very fabric of Brazilian society. And those are patterns that, honestly, Brazil is still dealing with today. All right, so that colonial setup leads us straight into Brazil's next chapter, which is, and I'm not exaggerating, one of the weirdest and most unique paths to independence you will ever hear about. Okay, so check this out. It's 1807. Napoleon invades Portugal. What does the Portuguese royal court do? They don't fight and lose. They pack up the entire court, thousands of people, and they sail to Brazil. All of a sudden, Rio de Janeiro isn't a colonial backwater anymore. It's the capital of the entire Portuguese empire. It's a total flip. Eventually, the king goes back to Portugal, but he leaves his son, Pedro, in charge. And Pedro, seeing which way the wind was blowing, sides with the Brazilians and just declares independence in 1822. Wild, right? So think about that. While all of its neighbors are fighting these brutal, bloody wars of independence to become republics, Brazil becomes an independent monarchy. For 67 years, it was the only empire in the Americas. And during that time, a new king rose to power: coffee. And it's also during this period that slavery is, finally, at long last, abolished. But getting rid of slavery and the monarchy didn't bring peace. In fact, it did the opposite. It threw Brazil headfirst into the 20th century, which turned out to be an incredibly turbulent time of constant change and revolution. Yeah, just look at this timeline. It's one major shakeup after another. In 1888, the Golden Law abolishes slavery. The very next year, the powerful landowners who lost their enslaved labor force, they back a military coup that gets rid of the emperor and creates a republic. Then, that republic gets toppled in a revolution in 1930,
And again, in 1964, the military steps in, starting a long dictatorship. It's just constant disruption.
And a huge figure at the center of all this was a man named Getúlio Vargas. I mean, he might be the most controversial politician in all of Brazilian history. On the one hand, he brought in modern labor laws and really pushed to industrialize the country. But on the other hand, he was an authoritarian dictator who absolutely crushed his political opponents. To this day, people are divided. Was he the father of the poor or just a tyrant? The answer is probably both.
And that brings us to the more recent part of Brazil's story, the period of military rule and the country's long, complicated road back to democracy.
The military dictatorship, which lasted from 1964 to 1985, really had two completely different faces. There was the side they wanted everyone to see, the Brazilian miracle. The economy was booming, growing over 10% a year. They were building massive infrastructure projects. There was a lot of national pride. But then there was the other side, the much darker side. We're talking heavy censorship, political persecution, no civil rights, and the widespread use of torture.
Finally, in 1985, democracy was restored. And this whole process led to a brand new constitution in 1988, which is still the foundation of the country today. It was a document designed to guarantee all these civil rights and social protections that had been lost, really setting the stage for modern Brazil. So when you look back, Brazil's story is just filled with these huge contradictions, isn't it? Immense wealth right alongside profound inequality, an incredible, vibrant culture that was literally born out of centuries of violent conflict. These tensions have shaped every single step of its journey. And that leaves us with the big question, the one nobody has the answer to yet. What comes next? What will Brazil's next chapter look like?